Welcome to the Tech Savvy Professor podcast, which features two faculty members who love tech and love making it part of their work. I'm Marty from Kent State University, co-coordinator of our master's program there.
And I'm Eric Perry. I am the program director for the counseling program at Divine Mercy University.
So generally, I'd just like to catch up and see what's new, what's going on with you. Anything in particular that family vacations are over at this point?
No, I got 2 more weeks till I go to the beach. I'm trying to keep my brain moving until then. That's been the challenge.
Yeah. I'm taking off for like 5 days to go to Chicago and catch a couple of Cubs games and visit with some of the Chicago relatives. And I promised Aileen we wouldn't spend all the time with my side of the family, that we'll take a day or two and just like go to the Art Institute. She really wants to ride on which to me seems burdensome, but she's like, yeah, we got to go on the L. That's going to be cool.
Just to be able to say you did it. Yeah.
It's a cheap date.
Right?
I'm not going to complain. And so we'll find some things to do. We wanted to go see some radio shows being recorded that they do. Wait, don't tell me, and things like that. And I haven't looked into it. And somebody told me the tickets are relatively expensive, so who knows? But I'll get 1 or 2 Cubs games in, depending on whether or not we go to Tuesday's game too. So we'll see. So today's topic, making virtual meetings and office hours actually work. And this has been a shift and I bring it on. I'll tell you, the one thing I hate, now we work in 2 different institutions. You're working all online. Your institution is all online. So you are much better versed in this than I am. We have been forced to do some stuff online during COVID. So our teaching and our meetings and everything was done online. So we kind of forced into that world during that period of time. And there are parts that I like and parts that I didn't like. The parts that I didn't like was teaching online. It was just tough for me to grasp that. That doesn't mean you can't have quality online education. For me, it was the part that I found difficult to do because of the kinds of courses I teach, which group work, we do groups. And so it's better to have that actual presence in doing the group. For me, it's better. And my experience as a teacher, and I hope my experience with the students I work with, I think that's what they're looking for. And then I teach family therapy, and we do a lot of simulations with that too. And that seems to work better in presence. And we can do sculpting and full at parts party and all sorts of things that work much better in a real presence. But I'll tell you, the thing that I love the most, meetings and office hours for students. Man, the drudgery of having to go sit in an under-equipped office in a building waiting for a student to show up, or having to go in just for a meeting on one day when it could be done online. That has been the joy of post-COVID world for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so my experience, a lot of it has been online. And the teaching side of it, I feel like I've gotten better at. I enjoy teaching in person. So we do residency experiences, and I've done that for a long time. Teaching skills courses, group, those have been really good experiences. But I actually don't mind teaching online for a lot of things. I think there's ways to do it. But I really like the virtual meetings and virtual office hours part. I do think it's a challenge for some, though, just the logistics behind how you make this work. And what I've noticed, I was looking at, job postings the last time we posted a position, and so many of the institutions are requiring like set virtual office hours. Like there's time that you need to be available for students, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think having some availability to do that is great. You're working remotely anyway. You can be comfortable in your own home. Yeah. But it's how do I get the students to me and organize my time, structure that time, because they can't just walk through my door. That would be awkward. So you have to find a way to do that. And luckily there's tools, there's different things that we can talk about that make this easier.
Yeah, here's the thing with office hours. Our institution has this, you have to provide us with 5 office hours when you will be available on campus should students need to come in and see you on campus. So what I do in my syllabus and what I've done for years is put in 5 hours that I can be there, but I tell them, you need to let me know if you're coming in
Hmm.
because I might have other things going on. I might be somewhere else in the building. You need to let me know if you're coming in before you plan to meet me at my office. Otherwise, there's this thing called Zoom, and we can meet via Zoom. And all you have to do is schedule that with me by giving me 3 days and times, and I'll respond to the one of those and say, let's go. And
Hmm.
I work in an environment that, we're a relatively small town outside of Akron. We're 20 minutes from Akron. We're 40 minutes from Cleveland. We're another 35 minutes from Youngstown, and we're 2 hours from Columbus. So none of my students, few of my students live in town. All of them live at least
Hmm.
20 minutes away. So it's 20 minutes driving in. It's 20, it's another 10 minutes finding a parking space. It's another 10 minutes coming to the building. And right there, then you come and you meet with them for 30 minutes. They get their questions, answers, and needs met, and then reverse that, and they're doing all the other stuff to get home. So they really like virtual office hours. They would much rather do virtual office hours. Very rarely do I get someone who wants to meet in my office, unless they're like a prospective student who wants to see the building and the campus and all of that. But most of my meetings, 95% of my meetings are done on Zoom or Teams. If it's a university sponsored kind of administrative meeting, they are forced to use Teams instead of Zoom because of Zoom is not supported like it really needs any support. But the threat is Zoom is not supported.
It just
Whereas
makes me sad.
I know. And they switched our phone system over to Teams. And I got
Mm.
my first phone message via Teams. And it had an email address of what I thought was the person who sent me the message, but it was another faculty member in the school. And I replied to the faculty member instead of actually being able to reply to the student. Yeah, I have no love for Teams. That could be a
No,
show right there and
that
then.
and then I could talk 40 minutes on that, I think.
Yeah. So it's the new normal. Accessibility and online is now available. You and I, it was kind of fun. You have to remember when we had COVID and everybody was scrambling to do stuff, you and I did like 3 2-hour workshops for our association on how to do online connecting and teaching and
Mhm.
how is it set up? How do you do it? How do you manage stuff? It was going to be one, and then it turned into two more where we had like 100 or so in Zoom joining us. It was pretty big back then, and then now it's really commonplace.
Mhm.
Anything, I mean, you've got the show notes in front of you. I've got the show notes in front of me. There are a bunch of tools that you can use for scheduling. Typically, many people use Doodle. There is one that I've toyed with. I don't know if you've toyed with it before. Calendly.
Mhm.
And I know a faculty member who was using Calendly, and I think they switched to something else. I used it for a while, but I still felt really locked into you've got to set certain hours that are going to be locked in that have students have availability to schedule stuff and other people have availability to schedule stuff. So you can set up groupings of what's available during the week for you to do that. And it worked pretty well. It allowed you to cancel, it allowed you to accept and put those kinds of things in the calendar and send back messages and reminders. It was a really kind of functional process for scheduling. So Calendly is
Mhm.
one of those. Of course, these links we'll keep in the show notes for folks to be able to look at. Have you used Microsoft Bookings? Because I know you're in that world.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I have not. I kind of did it through, it's been some time, but there was a tool in the calendar that you could make spaces available for folks to reserve. And I think they had since moved that since the 365 shift into this Microsoft Bookings. So I haven't heard a ton about it. I know it works in tandem with Teams, so I try to avoid it just because of its association with Teams. but it certainly is an option if you're stuck kind of in that team space. Zoom also has its own kind of scheduling features that you can use. That I have tried a couple of times. Early on, it felt like you were kind of locked into the same kind of thing that was your experience with Calendly, and you have to integrate it with your calendar. And one of
Yeah.
the issues that I had pretty consistently working with a Google Calendar was getting the Zoom scheduling feature to work properly so that it would actually schedule all my meetings with Google Meet links instead of Zoom links. I couldn't get it to properly connect and generate a Zoom link. That may have been corrected since then, but that's always been my issue. It's part of the reason I went back to Doodle for scheduling.
Yeah. Google does seem to default everything on its calendar to Google Meet and not Zoom, which makes it rather frustrating because you're to get it scheduled, you schedule it, then you have to go back and change and edit the scheduled appointment to fit. If you're using Google Calendar, I'm using Fantastical, and Fantastical still has some of the if you're running anything through your Google or Gmail account, it's gonna force it to Google Meet. And like you, my preference is Zoom. Typically, my meetings don't just involve me and a student.
Mhm.
They, because if it's me and a student, we don't have to do a doodle poll. It's like, hey, student, send me 3 dates and times you're available. Chances are one of those will work with me. I'll pick the one, send it back, and then I'll put it in my calendar. I will also send back a Zoom link for the student to be able to access my office. I have a Zoom for my office hours, is what I call it.
Mhm.
And and so for that reason, I don't use Doodle. If I'm working with like on a dissertation with another faculty member that's a co-chair, we tell the student just do a doodle poll and we'll respond to the doodle poll. And the problems with that is it's either the other person or me that's like, yeah, I'll get to it later. And then 2 days later, they're still waiting for me to respond to their doodle
Mhm.
poll. And eventually things get sorted out. We get that point together, and then I'll decide to meet on Zoom instead of Teams because it's much more functional. Do have some folks who are a little anal retentive and are scared that the Kent State Police are going to come after them if they're using Zoom instead of Teams. So they
Mhm.
insist on having Teams meetings because, well, they follow the rules.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Well,
uh,
in Google Meet, I will say if Teams makes me sad, Google Meet makes me, it works. It can work, but it's certainly not the quality. And what I've found, especially working with students who tend to be in rural areas or struggle with connections or maybe working off a cell or satellite signal, Zoom just seems to work better connectivity wise. But Google Meets does a little, I would say, a little better than Teams does in terms of connectivity and managing that. Because I'm find myself kind of that's the option I want to go with the most, and that's how I've advocated for Zoom in the past. It has worked better, I think, for students who tend to struggle with connection speed.
yeah. And, if your university is concerned about quality of experience for their students, then they're going to allow you to select a platform that works for students. I have never selected anything outside of Zoom when I'm doing it. And that seems students know how to do that. That's what, during COVID,
Mhm.
that's how they talk to their grandpa
Yeah.
and such. It was easy for them to get that set up and for them to go and to work with as a platform. So there's no argument there. And I don't think even our IT people would argue that Zoom is a preferred platform for students and for faculty. But, I have two Zoom accounts that I pay for, one that I use for work and one that I have as a secondary account that I needed to set up one time because I was running classes and it was some arrangement with group meetings where I needed to have both accounts running at the same time for students to be able to do the experience they were going to do, and they couldn't do it within under one Zoom account. So yeah, I've only been to one Google Meet meeting that I can remember in the last 3 years, and it was like a month ago. Somebody decided to go on Google Meet. I'm like, oh, okay, we'll try that. So mainly Zoom, I think, is what folks are doing. Do you use FAQs with your program? Like,
So
do you have a
I was just
website with frequently asked questions?
I was just going to mention there's one thing I love more than a virtual meeting, and that's canceling a meeting. Like it feels great to get a meeting off the calendar and to free up an hour. Like as an administrator, I still have a teaching load. So, I know that that hour means I can get something else done. So we have a couple of different things that we've set up that I think have really reduced the need for students to schedule time. And every institution is different. So for our students, they plan their own schedule. They're either full-time or part-time. They have to manage that, register for themselves. So oftentimes a lot of what they want to meet about has to do with what course do I need to take next. They're trying to plan ahead. Something has come up where they need to drop to part-time status, or they want to return to full-time status, or a lot of those questions come up. We actually have a site that we created that walks them through scheduling processes and scenarios. That's our first kind of stopgap. Work through this, send me the results, and I'll review them. And if we need to meet, we can meet. We also have a course shell that every student in the program is a part of. And that's where we kind of post all the information a student would need. It's where we post updates about what's going on in the program, changes, things like that. But usually there's somewhere we can direct them to first in terms of finding information. Because I've been in these meetings before where we've scheduled an hour, half hour, and we have 6 minutes of runtime. So, could have been an email. So FAQ documents are really helpful for that. But I think there's other spaces, even in your LMS, that you can find a place for things to live. And then a general discussion board that students will post questions to that faculty are assigned to kind of monitor. And then as those questions come in, we give responses there publicly that others can see. So if they've had similar questions, it's searchable. So during their first residency, we talk about how to get into that and how to search for questions others may have asked. So there's ways we can direct them towards information that kind of cuts down on the need for those meetings.
Yeah, I wish we would have effective use of FAQs and question and answer boards in our program, but we haven't thought that way. We've always thought if you've got a question, talk to Dr. So-and-so. If you got a question on this, talk to Dr. Gencius. Here's, what's posted is my email address and my office phone number, which now rings through Teams. And, so I get the messages here at home. They don't give me the content that I need, but I get the messages here at home. I just wish it was better. We had more things down on paper or available through web design. Frankly, if they would take away my job or take me out of my job and give it to someone else, I would spend all of my time dedicating to putting together FAQs, Q&A boards, and even try to answer those Q&A boards. The problem is that, and I wonder how this works for you. I can see someone asking a question 2 months ago that I answered that somebody 2 months from now asked the same question. And if it's a question and answer board, not everybody goes back to search for answers. First of all, getting them to the FAQ or getting them to the Q&A board is the first step. I can imagine people bypassing that and just saying, oh, let me email Dr. Perry because he knows the answer to this question. So, how do you direct the learning flow for students in that situation?
Well, yeah, so there's a couple of things that come to mind for me. First, no solution is going to catch them all. You're never going to get to those people who just won't look, right? They just want to hear from you. They want to talk to you. They want a direct response from you. That being said, by and large, I feel like most of our students are really good about wanting to find their own information. So I direct them back to the information that's there and say, hey, I know this has been talked about here. It's on this page. Read it. Let me know what you think. For me, it's kind of a teaching tool. There's a lot that we do as clinicians that we need to go out and find our own information. We need to find answers, responses. And I want them to be used to kind of looking for things and finding it. And oftentimes they'll come back and say, okay, this is what I found. Is that right? And I can say, sure, yeah, it is. Or no, you looked in the wrong place. So I think some of that is helpful for them from a developmental perspective. We want them to get used to finding information in this way. But I think there needs to be some consistency for that. I actually have a a colleague who is kind of known for their warm fuzzy and is just approachable and sweet. And, they all know her from residency. And so she gets all the questions and she'll
Yeah.
always answer all the questions. And
Yeah.
she's stressed because she answers all the questions. So, some of that, you have to have some consistency in approach because she's kind of become the de facto point of contact for anything and everything. So I think that direction is really important. Getting them in front of it, redirecting them to it, and then knowing you're just not going to get everybody to do it.
Well, there's a lot of infrastructure we could be putting up to assist. I put together a program website outside of the structure that the university has, and the website was for supervisors, basically for our site supervisors, because then we can control the content, we can do short videos, and we have done some of those for site supervisors as part of our need to do a orientation for site supervisors. So we decided just to put that online, and we've switched some of our admission process. It used to be individual interviews, and we're now doing group interviews. So part of that is everybody needs to be on campus for that one day we're doing group interviews for admissions, and that never works. Last time we did it for this fall's admissions, we had about 10 of the 50 people say, can't make it. Can we look at something? Because legitimately, they were far away, or there were conflicts, or they were teaching during that day because they were working in the schools. And I decided to meet them online as a group for 3 hours. And I went through some of the material, but I realized the presentation that I gave to the group that I saw face to face on that group interview day, I could just record and put it on, and store it. And then when it came time for the folks who were going to do the virtual one, I just said, hey, let's cut an hour off of the 4 hours that we would normally spend and break it down to 3 hours by you watching this video, which should answer most of your questions. And if not, we'll spend some time talking about it. And that was a lifesaver because I did not want to do that 1 hour lecture 3 times again, and kind of left that learning up to them to be able to ask questions as needed. So getting more thoughtful about how to do that with FAQs, with orientations, with things like that, I think we need to think more about in terms of our program. There are some platforms. I'm not familiar with Piazza. Are you familiar
I'm
with
not.
this?
I think it was pretty interesting, though. I spent a little bit of time looking at it.
Yeah, it's a wiki style format. So it's a Q&A platform. And then you can do this if you're using Canvas. We have a link here for how do I create a discussion as an instructor. So it gives you directions on how to create discussion boards if you want to do that. Have you used much of Notion?
Nope, I have not. Have you used it?
It was the shiny object like last year and the year before. Everybody who was doing kind of tech-based stuff and the group that I hang out with were screaming about how great Notion is. And I heard it from some academics. So I swore, and I still have a Notion account, and I think it's a paid account. I swore I'm going to learn Notion because it's the next shiny object. At Macstock, there is someone who did a really remarkable presentation on all the things that they can do with Notion. Unfortunately, they didn't tell us how they actually got to be able to put those things together. So the mystique of how to be able to organize it was still there. But I got re-inspired, and it's like, can I try Notion again? It's sort of like, okay, well, I'm on a 3-week break here. I will teach myself Notion, or I will teach myself Final Cut Pro, or I will teach myself tools that I need to learn. And guess what? I just have not learned Notion yet. And I don't hear people talking about it like the shiny object anymore. Maybe they've moved on to something new or something old. But it's supposed to be great, perfect notes and note taking, and you can search everything through your notes and organize them and put tags on them, and the level of minutia in terms of organization that I never get to.
I mean, it looks interesting, but it does seem like a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention that you had on here, and I was kind of saving this for you,
Okay.
is the AI chatbot. I really like the
Oh,
idea of the AI chatbot. We're actually piloting one for our website now, and I'm trying to get in the test group to help pilot it. I think it's going to be it's interesting. What I'm worried about is sometimes these turn into your sales chatbot,
yeah.
and I'd like for it to be a little bit more, like how do we do this on the student side for our existing students in ways that help them find information?
Yeah, I had a frustrating experience with the AI chatbot this weekend, and it was Apple's AI chatbot. I was on trying to purchase a computer for my son, who's starting his first academic job in a couple of weeks, and does Gear Up and Go with me as a podcast, does it off his laptop. And I'm like, let's get you an M4 Mac Mini so you can have that as a desktop and you can use your laptop to and from school as you go. And I just had a miserable time because it kept, I want to know how to do something. Your chatbot doesn't have the capability of understanding, but it took me through a whole series of questions I had to ask and answer before it finally said, "Oh, okay, we'll connect you with someone live." And so I have not been ever gotten any information that I need out of AI chatbots. Like you say, sometimes they turn into sales stuff, and that's frustrating because I don't want a salesman following me around the store.
Mm.
And if it has kind of a humanitarian, let's help you navigate this new entrance into education that you're thinking of doing, that's a different feel. But I haven't had that experience with any AI chatbot that I've used before.
Yeah, I mean,
Good
there's
luck.
there's hope. There's hope. I really want to see it. And that's, we communicated that want to IT, but whether or not the capabilities out there or they're simply just not designed that way, I really don't know. So I'm interested to see what kind of comes of it. But I think having something like that that actually functions in a way that helps you find information would be a great tool for students to have.
There are some other apps that I think are worth talking about for
Mhm.
for meetings. I have tinkered with Loom. It is essentially a way of creating videos, doing all sorts of design elements that would help you in terms of passing information on to students. And it's got a screen recorder. It's got all sorts of other functions that you can do in editing whatever videos you create and then sharing them out. So it's an interesting product. Pricing, I think starter is zero, business is $15 a month per user, and then business plus AI is $20 a month per user. So Slack. Can we talk about Slack?
I, I want to, and I don't.
Why not?
I like Slack. I think it has a lot of utility. I've just struggled so much with buy-in, getting
Oh, from
folks to
other people?
actually
Yeah.
engage it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I wished our program would communicate through Slack, instead of email after email after email after email. And who's on this email? Who didn't get this email? I wish most of this stuff could be communicated through Slack, but getting people to buy into it, I agree with you. I actually, when I teach the tech portion of college teaching, when I have taught it, I taught Slack. One of the tools I showed students was Slack and had them
Mm.
sign up for a Slack account or a Slack, I don't know what you call it, a Slack discussion. And we use that a little bit in the class. The idea that it's available, the idea that you can get notifications on it, the idea that it's all in a separate app, it's not part of your email.
Hmm.
I really like it, and I have liked it for quite a long time, but getting buy-in and getting people to follow through with it. I had a task force group that I wanted them to not for us to have very few meetings and instead to do it on Slack and report information on Slack. I had trouble getting half of them, and this was a tech-based task force. I had trouble getting some people to even sign up for it, even after sending them invitations and stuff. They just they didn't want to do it. They just wanted to do email. Even Google Drive and sharing things on Google Drive is a challenge for some folks nowadays and getting by in it. But Slack was harder. Slack was great when it was free and everything was free and you could use it forever. And now it still is free, but stuff drops off after 3 months. But frankly, or maybe it's 6 months, I can't remember. Frankly, you don't need to keep half of your communications longer than that anyways, in terms of that. So I am currently using Slack for, like, I'm on the British Tech Network, so they have a Slack that are for people who are in the green room and working on British Tech Network stuff. Mac Voices has a Slack, and so we get all of our show notes through the Slack on Mac Voices, and there's some chatter that goes on with it. And then, yeah. So yeah, Slack is one of my favorite apps for doing that. Microsoft Teams, we've already spoken about, and then Doodle, which I think most people are familiar with, are great apps to use if you're going to use that. We'll have pro tips within the show notes. So look at the show notes on either the podcast or the video cast, and you'll have more suggestions and things that you can do along with the links to the different things we've talked about. Any final comments, Eric?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay. All right. So let's do a wrap on this. You can email us at thepodtalknetwork@gmail.com. Our website is thepodtalk.net if you want to find out about other shows that we do as part of the Pod Talk group. Look for us on Spotify, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, and all podcast servers. Our bumper music is from Philip Gross, Rast from the Free Music Archive. Everything you need to know is at thepodtalk.net. Check out Circular Firing Squad. That's the other one Eric and I are on together as time goes. And other things like Vision Profiles, which is part of the VR, AR podcast that I do and vodcast that I do. Eric, thanks for doing this. We're going to have to work out vacation calendars over the next couple of weeks and figure out when we can do it again. But that's it for this episode. Thanks for subscribing to the Tech Savvy Professor.